Our next presenter is Dr. Drew Gholson. He is the coordinator for the National Center for Alluvial Aquifer Research Center over at Leland, Mississippi. He is a professor with Mississippi State. And
I'll mute your mic, Drew.
we're trying to, he's going to be.
There you go.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Good deal. Let's see. Sorry. I guess I can't find the mute. But y'all can't hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
we can hear you. Yeah,
Okay.
you're good.
All right. Well, welcome. I appreciate it, Dennis. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. I wish I was there in person, but this works well for me with my schedule today, and been pretty common way to do meetings, and so I am appreciative of being involved in this, and I appreciate Dennis and RL and the folks with LSU Ag Center there that offering not only a meeting but in-person meetings to be able to get some of this information out. And so I appreciate it. And here's my contact information as well, and I will have that at the end also. Just kind of to be able to start with a little bit of background and well, I'll introduce myself a little bit more. So Dennis mentioned a long mouthful of where I'm located, and I'm the irrigation specialist, the extension irrigation specialist at Stoneville, Mississippi, with Mississippi State University at the Delta Research and Extension Center, and then we've a newly created National Center for Alluvial Aquifer Research, which is a cooperation agreement where we have Mississippi State University faculty and USDA ARS scientists working together to really look at water use efficiency, with the premise being on the declining aquifers and trying to use less groundwater, being more efficient, and increase the yield and increase profit, being able to use less water. And so that covers a large area, whether that's surface water use or water irrigation efficiency, groundwater recharge, and just different aspects of water use in a row crop environment, and specifically in the lower Mississippi River Basin. And I'll have a few resources that you can go and look at it towards the end of this presentation on the center as well. And so with that, you can see the trends in groundwater use over time, specifically here in Mississippi and in the Delta region around the 80s. We saw a real quick or a fast increase in water wells and putting in new wells and adding irrigation acres to this area. Just with the overall benefits of utilizing groundwater. It has a long residence time. Groundwater is a very consistent source of water. It's pretty well protected and drought prone or protected from droughts. So you're not going to see that fluctuation real quick like you will with surface water, whether it's available or not. So it's a really reliable source. And I mean, you know, the ease of being able to put a well where you want it to, if you have if you're blessed enough to have a great supply of groundwater that covers your property, you can put the well at the location that you want. So this is a great source for irrigation water for crops. And with that, you know, with all those benefits, you see groundwater being used for that. And so we just want to make sure, as you look at the Mississippi embayment or the lower Mississippi River area compared to the High Plains Aquifer and the Central Valley being really the top three, as when we look at groundwater depletion, lower Mississippi River is one of the most productive and intensely irrigated agricultural regions, as we rank pretty high with the total withdrawals. And so with that, when we talk about sustainable agriculture, and specifically in the irrigation management or irrigation efficiency world, not only, I mean, that is what the background I just went through, it is very important to make sure that we have a resource that sustains all and into the future and into the next generation and our grandkids to be able to utilize that, because we do realize it is an important advantage to be able to maintain, to irrigate that crop. But at the same time, we want, as we go through an irrigation efficiency program or an extension program that focuses on irrigation water management and efficiency, we want to make sure it is also, we want to try to have our target right there in the middle of that sustainable. And so it's got to be economically viable as well. So if it's not profitable, yeah, it's not sustainable. We can't have practices and suggestions to say that this is going to cost yield or this is going to cost too much money and it doesn't pay for itself. Number one, that's not going to get adopted and used, and it's not sustainable to be able to have a practice that's not economically viable. And then you want to make sure the quality of life of farmers and farm families and that community is all sustainable going forward. So just with the preference of being able to balance that, when we talk about sustainability, yes, we want to make sure we have groundwater, but it's got to be economically, and it's got to have some large net returns to be able to show. And that's what we're really focused on. And today I'm going to really highlight what my predecessor as well, Kreutz, did, Dr. Kreutz, who's what position I took over, and then how we're expanding that here at in Stoneville and at the National Center for Alluvial Aquifer Research. But really honing in on that star there, we want to make sure we have increased net returns, and we want to have irrigation water use efficiency, being able to put only the water out that we need, and especially in this area of the lower Mississippi River Basin, in the Delta region, where it is where furrow irrigation is predominantly used for when we talk about irrigation application. And then just with the inherent application issues with furrow irrigation, whenever you're utilizing your conveyance system, is the same pathway that you're applying your water to that plant. And so there's some tools that we can utilize to make sure that we increase that water use efficiency, but at the same time, these tools that are going to pay for themselves or increase those net returns is what we're focused on in there. And so when we look at specifically, like I said, into furrow irrigation application, we have a computerized hole selection is what I would consider the baseline, the foundation for being as efficient as possible with furrow irrigation, being able to select the correct hole size in your poly pipe to have an applied application or an efficient and application as you lay it out. If you're not applying that water evenly across those furrows, and they're not going to come to the end of that run at the same time, if we have application issues, the other issues are going to continue to be a problem if we can't apply it, whether you're using soil moisture sensors or surge irrigation. We've got to start with making sure we're applying that water the most efficient way and getting it out on those furrows as we run through it. And so you can see this picture here where we had those short runs, water out real quickly, and we're still trying to finish the irrigation there in the middle, and you're going to run that until those rows meet the end row, and then you're going to have to continue to pump that water there. And so you're going to have not only a waste of water, and you're pumping a lot of money out as well as you continue to have that well run with the water running down the drainage ditch there. And so we want to make sure that there's tools to be able to use, and computerized hole selection, like I mentioned with Pipe Planner, is to me would be the foundation for that. And so we can create detailed maps with field data. When you go and utilize this, if you're utilizing Pipe Planner, there's several other choices, but what it does is it calculates the best hole size for a uniform application. So based on your rate of your well, your gallons per minute, and then your elevation along that polypipe run is what inputs you need to be able to put in, and it's going to generate a predictable. It's going to generate hole sizes for that, and then at the same time, it's also going to predict or give you a estimate on your irrigation time to maximize water use. And so a big the default, maybe if you want to put it 3 acre inches out, and it says, based on this information that you put in the run links, it's going to take 24 hours to water out and apply 3 acre inches. And if a grower turns on his well and runs it down there, and he's out of the field in 12 hours, then we have an infiltration issue, because it's half the time, and you're not putting out the amount of water that your crop needs. And so, even from the standpoint of efficiency and application, but also it gives you a good idea what we're getting into the ground when we look at how much water we're applying to that field. If I can get this to work, here's an example of, if you have the same hole size going down, you're going to have more pressure at the beginning of that poly pipe. And as you water out, you're going to reach those first runs. The first rows are going to water out and begin that runoff, and then you're going to continue to have to run that to make sure the rest of the field's out. And so when you have utilize a program like for computerized hole selection, like Pipe Planner, and where it takes into account the water flow, the gallons per minute for that well, and then the length of that run and the elevation changes, to where the goal of that point is to make sure each one of those rows are going to water out at the same time. And so your runoff water, your run time, and most importantly, and that's where we save that money, is your run time, your efficiency is increased, and you're watering that your well's run is decreased, and so you're saving a lot of water. And then we really see it shine when we talk about these irregular shaped fields, and like that picture I showed you earlier, when you have some short runs and you have long runs, and as you put it into that program, that it's going to make it a lot easier to time that out to where our rows are going to be watered out at the same time, where you're saving a significant amount of water. And another tool that we've seen, and that's been where all these tools we have put on farm and evaluated to try to find ways to increase application efficiency and increase net returns on that. And so another tool that we see is utilizing a surge irrigation. And what we've seen is it reduces surface runoff losses, it decreases deep percolation losses, and it improves infiltration, especially if you have those sealing soils. Like I mentioned, if that water shoots across the top and it gets out to the end of the run too quickly, you're having issues. You're not actually getting the water down into the root profile, the crop roots profile, and you're shooting the water across. There may be some utilizing surge irrigation can help move that and increase that infiltration, specifically in those sealing soils. And in the research being done, it showed that application efficiency it can be 25% or higher compared to not utilizing a surge irrigation. See this image here? Let's see if I can get this to work as well. There we go. This just shows you the picture of what that looks like. In the top portion, the top portion is where we're utilizing a surge. You're going to split that field in half, and you're just going to alternate back and forth. And then the one at the bottom is where you're just constant watering, running down the rows, and as you water out until it reaches the end. And in the top, you're alternating from top or left to right and left to right, and you're shooting water across. And the idea there is, as a wetted surface that had time to soak in, that water is going to move across that quicker, as opposed to non-wetted surface or the soil. And so as it shoots across the furrows quicker on the wetted portion, and then as it reaches the non-wetted, it's going to slow down and wet that section, and you're going to run it, and then it's going to slow down and infiltrate into that ground and have time to infiltrate into that surface, and then you're going to switch back to the other side, and it's just going to continue to pulse its way down until it reaches the end of those rows. And then it's going to send what we call the soak cycle, and it's going to shoot water, and even on time, you can see that it increases the time to get to the end of those rows, and then you're going to send these pulses across. Once you reach the end, it's going to alternate back and forth and send these pulses or these soak cycles all the way across, and it really increases in efficiency, and to where we can make sure we're applying that water to the root zone of that plant. Move on to and here's just another look at what that looks like from maybe a subsurface area. As that pulses down with surge, as you move across, it's going to slow down and infiltrate into the soil, and you're going to be able to really almost spoon feed that, especially from a furrow irrigation standpoint, to where we're really trying our best to be as efficient as possible into that root zone. And as we apply that water exactly where it needs to be, and it goes through, and then you're going to see the soak cycling as it goes down, and you're going to have less runoff. You're going to have less deep percolation going past the roots where that's wasted water. And we just, we talked about nitrogen management as well. As if we can keep that water and not push nutrients past that root zone, we're going to be more efficient not only in our irrigation but more efficient in our nitrogen or fertilizing fertility program as well. It gets skipped. See if I can go back. One more. And so here's the same view that we just looked at without utilizing surge irrigation. And so as we try to run that water down, you're continuing to get infiltration into the upper ends of the runs, and as you're watering down to the bottom. So you see that gray area below at the front end. As you try to water out at the bottom, you are having some deep percolation losses. As you're trying to, as you want to make sure that profile reaches all the way, or the irrigation infiltration at the bottom end of the field, to make sure you get down deep on that end, you're overwatering at the front end. So that's what surge irrigation allows you to do, is to really focus in on that root zone portion of the plant. And then the third tool that we are pushing is really soil moisture sensors, being able to moisture by depth. So as the roots continue to grow and get deeper, what's the available moisture down there that the plant has access to? And then that helps us with irrigation triggering. What's available to it? What's available to that's where the roots actually are. And then you're able, in addition to that, I mean, with irrigation scheduling, you can utilize active rooting zone. You can be able to see by where the plant is pulling that water from that soil profile at a certain depth. You can see that decrease. You can see where it's using that water. So you can monitor your rooting depth by having soil moisture sensors in there. And then again, infiltration depth. It helps you, gives you a pair of eyes down below the surface if we are having infiltration issues. Do we have a compaction layer down there? We're just not getting past 12 inches or 6 inches down there. And what utilizing soil moisture sensors opens a little window to what's going on below there. And through with watermark sensors has been heavily utilized and popular here in Mississippi, in the Mississippi Delta, trying to look at simple irrigation scheduling thresholds to where we can look at with that crop to make sure that we're not going past a stress point to where we're giving the water that it needs, but we're not giving too much water to that plant, and making sure that we don't go past a threshold that's going to cause any yield reducing stress due to irrigation water. And so with some studies that we've done here at Mississippi State and through Dr. Kreutz as well, is finding that threshold and keeping it under 90 to 100 centibars, not passing that threshold, so that there was no yield loss in the soils here in the Mississippi Delta. And then as the plant grows, specifically in corn, from the prior to tasseling, making sure we have a wet profile, plenty of water be used up to and prior to tasseling. And then as you work back on the back end of the growing season, from dent to black layer, maintaining that soil moisture profile but at the same time, that corn's not using the water at the rate it was during that V12 or V15 to tasseling and a little bit past that. And so soil moisture sensors can help guide those, not only what the plant needs, but what it's utilizing during that time frame. And then we get on the back end of it as we go in towards dent stage, and as corn reaches 70, so at the point of dent, corn has reached 75% of its weight. And so if you apply no more irrigation at that point and it does not have sufficient moisture in that soil profile there at that point, then there's still a chance for some pretty significant yield loss, up to 15 to 20% if it's not getting the moisture that it needs during that time frame. Although it is using a less than what it was prior into it, there's still to make sure we reach the moisture out there to all the way into the black layer, and making sure there's adequate moisture is important for us on that. And so once the milk line layer appears and it moves through the kernel, it's estimated around 21 to 24 days until it reaches that point of maturity where no extra water is needed to finish out those kernels or out that crop. And so here's an example. If we look through there, we estimated here that we have about 30% milk line. We've got about 16 to 17 days. And so utilizing soil moisture sensors on the back end is very helpful to make sure that we have enough moisture in that profile, and we can predict out how many days we have available water into that profile to see if it's going to make it out, or do we need to add another application of irrigation to that to make sure it has adequate water. And so here's a good graph from Dr. Larson, our small grains and corn specialist here in Mississippi State. And you can, as those arrows drop down, you can really see the water use of that corn plant through that growth stage. And so that moisture, so not only are we making sure we have plentiful soil moisture or moisture into that soil profile, but you can see as it starts to flatten out through milk stage, through up into dent, and then up to 50% milk line, it starts to flatten out, and that's telling us that crop is using less water. And so where we may have been watering once a week, it may be able to be pushed out a little bit further and saving those water, or saving those irrigation. And if we can continue to push that out just a few days, then we have those chances for those rainfall events to maybe recharge our profile, and we were able to skip an irrigation. And so utilizing where the growth stage is on that plant and being able to know what we have moisture-wise in our profile gives us confidence in what that plant actually needs. And to not only stress it, we don't want to stress it from being too dry, but being able to push it just a little bit further because we're comfortable that it has enough moisture. In this area, especially, we're able to utilize rainfall events. And if we can get a rainfall prior to needing an irrigation, and we just not saved an irrigation from that standpoint, that's where we start saving those dollars and saving that money. And so here's an example of an on-farm sensor that we have this year. We were working with them and utilizing, and it all depends on their field and how long the run is, how long it takes to get around, to make sure we stay within our thresholds. And so we hit a trigger point of 60 centibars for this particular field and this farmer, because we didn't want to get over 80 centibars. That red line was where we didn't want to make sure we did not get over. And so he did a pretty good job of our recommendations as we work through them. And as you can see, as we go down, that one rainfall event didn't get what we needed to recharge, and so we're able to see with soil moisture sensors that we still hit our trigger a few days later, and so we had that irrigation number 2, and then again that other rainfall. We can have large rainfalls like you can see that first one where it really reset our soil profile, and so it just aids in helping what may be going on, how much effective rainfall we may have received, or even how effective our irrigation application is. And here's another soil moisture sensor set, and you can see our threshold that we worked with them on as being 80 as well, and he never really reached above 40 centibars, and didn't have a lot of confidence in our recommendations this first year, and hopefully we can move those numbers up a little higher. You can see how many additional irrigations we can see by not really letting that soil profile dry out a little bit longer. You could add 3 to 4 days on many of these occasions, and you can see these rainfalls that especially on that, after that irrigation one, it wasn't close to needing an irrigation on that crop, and then they had a heavy rainfall and really zeroed out. That's one. And then just real frequent irrigations where oversaturation and issues with that can especially early season in corn, you can cause yield drags just by applying too much water, especially, like I said, in the early season, a part of the corn crop. And here's our on-farm evaluations that my predecessor, Dr. Kreutz, done, and I continuing to look at, where we're comparing those tools that I just mentioned with soil moisture sensors, surge irrigation, and computerized hole selection, where we're comparing it to utilizing those tools and then letting the grower irrigate the way that they normally have. And so you can see the difference in water use, acre inches, and then about around 41% decrease in total water use. And then, like I mentioned at the beginning of this, is that profitability and net returns. And you can see where these tools are paying for themselves if we utilize and be able to have less water, less time that well's pumping that water out. And that's really where we're trying to focus, is being able to show that we can save money by actually putting less water out. And so I'm going to wrap up with that information, but I do want to point you to a few sites for some resources. And so this is H2O initiative through a group of specialists in the lower Mississippi River Basin area, where you can go and get information about pipe planter, about soil moisture sensors, about surge valve irrigation, and then rice irrigation with MIRI and AWD. And then also mentioned the National Center for Alluvial Aquifer Research that we have down here in Stoneville, and with Mississippi State University and USDA ARS. Here's our website. It's ncar.msstate.edu. And we just real quick run through, just to point you, not to really go into it, but just to point you to resources. We have a soil moisture sensor showcase. You can go to this website here, and what this allows you to do is to see what soil moisture sensors that are available on the market, and then also what telemetry services that can be tied to those different sensors, and allow you to log in and not only just read through the differences between the soil moisture sensor companies, but log in and utilize that. We have a username and password for each one of those, so you can see what the interface and the interaction is by what the readings are telling you, what the graphs they produce, and how the scheduling may fit your operation the best without having to go out and buy those prior to that. In addition, on the same website with our NCAR website, you can see some YouTube videos as we begin to create content to help. And what we have so far is based around soil moisture sensors, but we'll continue to grow that being able to get your flow meter, reflow meters. But we have some soil moisture sensors on videos on construction and installation and removal, and utilizing these telemetry services. And we have our extension publications as we begin to work through and develop those with this new unit. Sorry, I ran through that last portion pretty quickly, but I just wanted to point to resources that you maybe have interest in and not really go too much into it. But with that, I'm going to close up, and here's my contact information. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Does anybody have a question? I was checking for chats to see if anybody is asking anything online. Let's say this, at Northeast States have flow meters that we loan out to producers you want to check the flow in your wells. We have a 10 and a 12, or we have a couple of 10s and a 12, and we can tell you how to use them. You just come get them, go check them, bring them back. It's pretty well.
That's great.
But we appreciate Drew talking to us today. And if you need help with pipe planter, myself, RL, Bruce Garner, and Wes Carroll Kylie Miller down in Concordia, Catahoula. Be glad to help you. And we also have sensors and we put them out if you want some, see how they work. All right.